Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And welcome to the 153rd episode of Shochu'sday. Kanpai from me in Tokyo and Steven
Kanpai.
in Fukuoka. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm getting ready for the next trip back, and hopefully last trip back to the States this year. Um, Came up quick. I don't know if it happens to you, but when something's happening at the beginning of a month, it feels like, oh, that's next month, even if it's like 3 days away. Um, it's like psychologically, it's easier for me to be like, oh, later this month I have to do X, as opposed to, oh, that's next month. Then I don't really plan very well.
Sure. I've only just gotten over my jet lag coming back from this
Yeah,
last trip, so it's every direction seems like the wrong direction for me.
fair, fair, fair.
Um,
I don't think
and
that's the banner you
maybe
want up, by the way.
what's that?
I don't think that was the banner you wanted up to start the show, by the way.
How did I start it? What was it?
But
Oh no.
Akamine. Yeah,
Oh no, that certainly wasn't.
yeah.
Okay. And we just heard from regular viewer of Show Tuesday, regular attendee. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
That's probably a good thing to start off with in terms of booze news. Anyways, can you tell us a little bit more
Sure.
about this podcast episode?
That's right. I had an opportunity to visit Denver on my last trip back to the States, and I visited the Denver distillery where they stumbled into making shochu. It was a really interesting conversation with the head distiller, Anderson Tarver. And I just turned on my mic on my phone, so it's not our usual scripted, organized podcast episode, but the the information and the knowledge he was sharing was just like really, really interesting. So I decided to just start my recorder, and I had him repeat some things. So he told some stories over again in order for me to get it recorded, and we cut it together. You make a cameo, I guess, since you weren't in Denver, but you and I did a little studio work to set context and that kind of thing. But it's
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting episode. It's a little bit of a wild card for us. It's not a our usual format, but I think it works, and it sounds like at least Anning Man liked it, and so appreciate that feedback. The We've recorded our next episode, and it's going to be very, very deep geek level stuff. Christopher drops a lot of chemistry on us, uh,
I don't know
which
if you could call it necessarily chemistry. Chemistry light, very very
yeah,
light.
chemistry and physics. I mean, it takes you
Sure,
back
sure,
to
sure.
high school. Interesting episode on what's happening inside the still during distillation, which is a pretty fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. In all of my work at Yamato Zakura and other distilleries, I've never been involved in the distillation side of things. I've always
Mm-hmm.
been part of the fermentation and koji propagation and bottling and washing sweet potatoes and that kind of thing. I've never gotten to never gotten to drive the car, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
The distillation part of it is it's a critical moment, and you can screw it up pretty easily. It's kind of like they don't let me in the operating room, even though I do surgical research. They don't let me run the still, even though I work in a distillery. So
It's the source of most or many mysteries for me when I
mhm.
walk into a distillery because they're kind of just like, hey, there's a still, and
Yep,
that is the beginning and the end of that conversation.
yep,
And I'm like, there's so much hiding in that corner. So I'm always that jerk who asks all the questions and puts
mhm,
somebody on the spot. Fortunately, we're at a point now where people expect that from me when I walk into the distillery.
mhm,
So usually somebody who can explain in quasi coherent terms is on duty to handle it. But yeah, it's a really really obviously crucial part of the process
mhm,
that just is, because of the science behind it, people just hear the really really vanilla explanations of how it's used and
mhm,
why it's used, and then everybody's like, cool, got it, let's move on to the next stage of the process. Yeah,
yep,
no, it's fascinatingly complex.
yeah.
And yeah.
I got my first taste of that kind of conversation when I visited a whiskey distillery with Matthew Powell from
There you
Seattle
go.
in the
There
doctor's
you go.
office, and we were in we were at Sanuki, the Mars distillery down in southern Kagoshima, and I
Mm-hmm.
would say for the entire let's say 1 hour that we were walking around the distillery and asking questions and learning about their process. That includes the aging facilities and everything. During that hour, I bet you we spent 25 minutes standing at the still. I bet almost half of the entire conversation and the questions that he was asking were about how they do their cuts, when they do their cuts,
Sure.
and all of the information that he could glean from what's their boiling temperature, what's their everything, how long is the run, from A to Z basically. And that was it was eye opening for me because I'd never been at a whiskey distillery with somebody who's just like a super deep, knowledgeable whiskey expert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so let me rephrase that. I've never been there with only one other person who was a very deeply knowledgeable whiskey expert. So that was really interesting to get that
Yeah.
perspective, and it made me realize, yeah, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time asking questions about the actual distillation, and that's what you do. So now I'm gonna
That's
follow your
that's
lead,
what you do.
Sensei.
Yeah.
So
It is there's a barrier there in terms of language when it
sure.
comes to the chemical terms and all of these things, and how do you pronounce phenols and all of these other things that you want to ask about. And then sometimes you're talking about things that the granddad who still runs the still and has for decades,
Hmm.
maybe he doesn't even know what those words are. He just
Right.
knows what they smell like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he has other ways to measure, measuring temperature and all of the other
Hmm.
cues that you take to figure out when to make your cuts. Much of it
Hmm.
intuition, honestly. But
Yep.
there's a bunch of things that people judge off of, and it's really interesting to get people's read and their personal. If you can get them to drop their guard a little bit and
Hmm.
talk about their thought process, it's really fascinating. And then fortunately, the literature's out there
Sure.
to help you understand exactly what they are talking about or what they're referring to. But it's a deep, 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 deep part of the process that often just gets overlooked. So yeah,
No question. Yeah.
please pay attention to the podcast feed and make
Yep.
sure to listen to that one as soon as it drops. And if you have any questions, then let us know. You know where to find us.
Yeah, that should be
Um,
next week, dropping next week. This week, the one that we dropped last week is the Denver distillery, and he talks about this. He's very analog in how he makes his cuts. It's all about taste and aroma. It's all about the flavor of the spirit as it's
yeah,
coming off the still and when to cut. Where you have, as you and I both know, when you get into larger production distilleries rather than these micro distilleries, it's often about what's the ABV, what's the alcohol coming off the still, and what's the temperature inside the still, and that more digital or more
they just
prescripted.
got more ways to measure. Yeah,
Yep, exactly. But he actually intentionally avoids that side of it in making his decisions because he wants it to be as handmade as he can do, and for him that's part of the process. He's relying on his own senses rather than on what the data is telling him. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. He's a really interesting guy. So if you haven't
sounds like it.
listened yet to the Denver Distillery episode, please have a listen. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are traveling again very soon. We'll both be back in the U.S. and we have some events coming up. Right?
That's right, and I guess these kind of blend together. The booze
Mhm.
news section of the day and the featured topic, which is just Stephen and I are flying out across the United States, and we have some fun things going on. Not all of them are us. There's some stuff in here. I got a few banners to flash up here. We're gonna go in chronological order, and well, shoot, where the hell did I put them? There they are. Okay. First and foremost is later this week,
Yeah.
and this is a Steven event. What you got?
Yeah. Well, so I will be at Umami Mart for the first time. This is
That's
embarrassing to me in
crazy.
some ways. I've known Yoko from Umami Mart for a very long time, but I knew her before she started Umami Mart with Kayoko. But I
Mm-hmm.
have never been back in the Bay Area since they've had a brick and mortar. I used to go there semi regularly, and then my travel schedule changed for work, and I just and stopped going there. And so this will be my first time back in the Bay Area in quite some time. Super excited. I'm so excited about Umami Mart that I actually booked my hotel in Oakland instead of San Francisco because I want to be nearby. And so we're doing an event on Friday. Actually, that's this Friday. It's kind of nuts to think about that I'm sitting here in Japan on a Wednesday morning, and on Friday afternoon, I'll be at Umami Mart in Oakland.
Yeah.
We're doing the first ever Takamine vertical tasting. So we're going to try the 2020, 2021, and 2023 blends, as well as the 16-year-old single cask that was that we gave a teaser of on the East Coast during our Takamine event at Travel Bar. Was that last month or earlier this month? I don't
That would
remember.
have been July.
Yep. So last month. So we're bringing out a little bit of that 16-year-old to try as well. So anybody who can make it to Umami Mart on this Friday, be happy to say hello and taste you through some different Takamine whiskey. That's a 2023 in Christopher's hand. That's the new label. And excited to share it with the folks at Umami Mart. The reason I decided to do the whiskey is because Christopher, is at Umami Mart all the time and doing shochu. So I decided I would do a Takamine event. So, but very, very much looking forward to that. If you are in the Bay Area and you want to say hello, please come to Umami Mart. Do we have a link to that? I think we do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be helpful if you can drop that in the chat.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a good time for me. While you're looking for that, I can switch over to the next event if that's cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so this one isn't ours, but it is, definitely worth your time if you're down in southern Japan. In Kagoshima, there's something called, here's something you probably didn't know, that September 6th is called Kuro Day, because Ku is 9, and that's September, and then Ro represents 6, or Roku. So Kuro Day is, which can mean black as well. Kuro it's on the calendar every year, and shochu awamori made with black koji often will latch onto it. And this year, Kuroisa Nishiki, which is made by Okuchi Distillery, is taking advantage of this, and they're doing an event that takes place in 2 parts of Kagoshima City simultaneously, from 1 to 8 p.m. at the the Shinkansen station, which what do they call it? Amu Plaza, I think is the name. That's the name of all of those, those commercial developments at the main Kyushu Shinkansen stations, and then not even Shinkansen. I think there's an Amu Plaza at Oita Station. There's one at Miyazaki Station as well. They tend to kind of take over those main train station areas, and they have this big open space, and they do events there. 1 to 8 p.m. on the 6th, they have Kuroisa no Hi, and also simultaneously from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Sen Terrace, which is the brand new, it's now over a year old, but the brand new shopping district that is in Tenmonkan, that whole new gigantic building with the library in it, and I think there's a cinema and everything. And on the first floor, over near Bunka no Dori, I think, Culture Street, they're going to have another thing set up so that, 2 things happening at the same time. And they have this card that you can buy. It's a little stamp card for 2 drinks and then some nuts. And I think it's 500 yen for a pair of drinks and a little snack to go with it. And you get your little stamp card to, fill it out. Prizes, of course. There's a drawing. And yeah, if you've never celebrated Kuro no Hi, then this is the time to do it in Kagoshima. Kuroisa Nishiki, of course, is the biggest selling sweet potato shochu, I think, by volume in Kagoshima City. So definitely worth knowing and getting familiar with down there. Not really a huge thing outside of there, but if you think of Kuro Kirishima as being the black koji sweet potato shochu across Japan, which it certainly is. I mean, by sales volume, by shipments, without a doubt, it's number 1 across the country.
Right.
But not in Kagoshima. If you're looking for basically Kuroisa is the Kuro Kirishima of Kagoshima, especially Kagoshima City. So it's kind of funny. That's a little bit of a kind of a gaping hole in Kuro Kirishima's coverage, and it makes sense because,
Sure.
as you know from listening to the two of us yahoos, there's a lot of sweet potato shochu going on in Kagoshima.
Yep. Yeah. They want to drink their local stuff and support local business rather than the Miyazaki maker that stole the Kirishima name, so to speak.
Yeah,
The
stole
Kirishima
the name of
Mountains
their
are
mountain and put
yeah.
it on their label. All right, we
Yeah.
can move on now
Yeah.
to. Oh, it's me again. I'm
I,
sorry, I didn't realize
yeah,
I
that's
had
right.
two in a
I
row.
just yeah, I just have a little comment about Kuroisa though. I had a good friend in New York who was kind of my shochu sensei to a large degree, uh, and she swore by Kuroisa. She did not really care for Kurokirishima, and
Mm-hmm.
Kuroisa Isanishiki was her go-to shochu. That was my friend Mai Kumagami, who you may remember
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now happily uh, domesticate living a domestic life and teaching in Nagasaki. But yeah, she used to be in New York and was highly influential in introducing me to shochu and explaining to me how the whole thing worked. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's when I first went to Kagoshima was right around the time that Kuroisa was kind of pipping Shiranami, Satsuma Shiranami for the local market. They were really putting their back into it. Meanwhile, Satsuma was kind of looking abroad
Mhm.
early on, and it was interesting to see all these yellow labels everywhere. All yellow labels with the stark black, Kuro kanji on there and
Mhm.
in the background. Everybody's bottle keep was that yellow label. Anyway, so now moving to the States again. Next week, we're going to be at Hinotes in San Diego. I'm going to be there, and it's my third event there this year. They are the best selection of shochu in. I mean, it's not the. It's hard to say who has more varieties of shochu, but they are right up there. It's one of the best selections of shochu in the United States. Very, very serious push behind it too. So you don't have shochu plus a huge sake program. You do have a lot of whiskey in there. You have a lot of Japanese whiskey, but otherwise, Masa-san, he's very, very serious about pushing shochu. It is front of mind for him, and it really is front of the menu. It's like the main thing that he goes after. So we're doing a couple of flights. We're doing one flight that's going to compare vacuum distilled shochu with atmospheric distilled shochu, and then a second flight that's going to be old school versus new school sweet potato shochu. So you can come in, grab some bites from the kitchen, and enjoy the education that naturally comes with tasting these different drinks side by side. So join me from 6 to 9, maybe 6 to 10 p.m. next Friday in San Diego, if you happen to be in that part of the world. All right, moving on.
Another city that I used to go to a lot and haven't been in a long time. So
No
yeah,
kidding. Yeah,
yeah.
California's just sort of dropped off the map for you, hasn't it?
That's right. Well, I used to never go to LA. Now I go to LA a lot. So who knows?
Yeah, but so have I. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's a big market.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so here we go. You're up.
Yep, that's right. So Wednesday, September 13th, time is still being decided, but of course in the evening, since it's a Wednesday, we're going to have a shochu tasting and seminar at the Black Forest Inn in Minneapolis. Should be a fun evening. I have a feeling there's going to be a little food available, and yeah, I'll be in Minneapolis that week. So again, if you're in Minneapolis or nearby and you want to say hello, please come on out. Details will be forthcoming. I think the final planning meeting is tomorrow, so still got a couple weeks for that one. But that's coming up in lovely Minneapolis, someplace that I don't mind visiting in the summertime.
There's someplace that I have never been. Here's a comment from Anagman. If I was saying, hey, if you want to become single, then why don't you come down to San Diego? No, that's not.
Bring the family.
Bring the fam. There you go. It is. I don't know if they allow kids in there necessarily, but it's a little speakeasy on the side of
Okay.
a noodle shop, essentially. You wouldn't know it's there. There's a false wall there that's actually a door when you walk in. Anyway,
Nice.
yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm jealous because you're gonna get to hang out with our friend Garrett,
That's right.
so who I have never seen on the other side of the Pacific, other than in phone calls. I do bother that guy by phone occasionally, which is always a pleasure. And I think the last one that we have really crystallized details for is this guy in Atlanta. I'll be in Atlanta that entire week, and on Thursday the 14th, I'll be at Elemental Spirits. Elemental Spirits is a really, really interesting bottle shop in Atlanta that has a finely curated list of spirits. Their book is great. They really care about hand selling cool stuff, and we are very grateful because they have a couple of very good shochu, and I believe also an awamori. They have crazy stuff there. So I'm gonna go and pour a few things, and we're gonna throw together a cocktail to make sure that people can try. I think we're gonna focus on yoka koji, our awamori, and try that in a cocktail application, and should be fun. So if you happen to be in Atlanta, please stop by between 5 and 7 p.m. a couple of Thursdays from now, and I will hook you up. What
Yeah.
it's
Another city I used to spend a lot of time and haven't been back to in a while. That's probably the longest. I don't think I've been to Atlanta in about 15, 20 years. But I used to live in Birmingham, Alabama. So when we wanted to go to the big city, we'd drive over to Atlanta. So I
Makes
spent a lot of
sense.
time there when I was younger.
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
great town. I'm
Yep.
I'm it could be a little better planned. It's
Yeah. This.
those stupid roads are always jam packed these days because
Well,
there's
it's a
too many people
sprawl.
moved in.
There are like no borders or no natural borders. So it just goes in every direction.
Mm-hmm.
As big as
Wherever
LA
there's
is,
not a
LA
hill.
does
Yeah.
have some natural boundaries to it. But yeah, cool. Yeah, I need to get to Atlanta, San Diego, and well, I am finally checking San Francisco off the list for the first time in a long time. But cool. Now there's gonna be some fun events. There may be some others that end up
There will be others. Yeah. So
that pop up.
yeah,
So
please pay attention
keep
to our
keep
social
an eye out.
feeds.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's probably all I'm going to be able to do. I have a pretty short trip plan, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it'll be those two. Maybe slide one or two other things in. Might be a little more informal. But my whole travel schedule is still just being worked out. So it's weird. Like 2 weeks to go, and I have like three things settled on my calendar. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the same problem I talked about earlier. Like that's next month. I got plenty of time to plan that. Oh wait, that's next week.
Mm-hmm. It's
So
now.
that's
Yeah.
right.
I'm
Anyway,
I'm heading to the airport at the same time tomorrow. So, um,
that's right.
yeah, it's gonna be a good one. I'm looking forward to seeing all the people out there that are quietly supporting Shochu and Aomori's rise. Come on
For
out,
sure.
say hi. Newly open time, bottle kill time. I don't know which
I
one, whatever you prefer.
I've got both, but I'm gonna go with Bottle Kill. This
Bottle kill.
one, yep. This is Masako,
Oh yeah.
our friend Furusawa from Miyazaki, and this was the first bottle of Masako I ever opened, and it's actually taken me a little time to drink through it, and I think I was feeling a little bit too precious about it since it's a U.S. Uh, export only brand.
Well, not
It's not
really.
well, true. It's starting to sell in Japan. Maybe that's why I
Yeah,
felt like I could
I mean,
actually
it
drink
sold
it.
into the Ritz Carlton in Fukuoka, didn't it?
Oh, fair. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so it's becoming a little bit of it available in Japan, but
you
uh,
can get it. Yeah, it's just
yeah,
we don't have a lot of it available. So.
sure. Yeah, but I finally made it. So I actually killed my first ever bottle of Masako last night, and it's interesting with these Furusawa products because they're so old when they go in the bottle, but they're also so lightly filtered. They're continuing to evolve,
Mm-hmm.
albeit very slowly, in the glass. It's in the bottle.
Yeah.
It's not inert. It's not like you highly filter a vacuum distilled shochu, and that really isn't going to change much in the bottle. But with these atmospheric distilled, a lot of residual oils because of light filtration, they're just continuing to evolve in the bottle, and it continues to get more and more mellow, which is very cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed it.
that is cool because I've had some very lightly filtered shochu that gets real funky in the bottle over
Hmm.
time. I got one right here. Actually, I'm saving it because I kind of want you to try it. I had it's a bottle of Aokage that's their Miyazaki Hadaka, 100% Miyazaki Hadaka barley, and this is unfiltered. There's great marbling in here, and it got super briny. It's really
Interesting.
really interesting. So
Nice.
like it got more interesting, honestly, on the
Very
palate.
cool.
Anyway, my
Yep.
my bottle kill is Hanashima Uta, which is a Masahiro product. It's their real something that some of these awamori makers do is they'll bottle at 25,
Hmm.
and it's kind of their version of a blue bottle summer shochu almost down in
Hmm. Hmm.
awamori country, in
Yep.
that it's light. It's just a softer expression than most people are used to. Not really my thing necessarily,
Hmm.
because I really do like the more standard awamori profile. But there's still enough girth to it that it is like if vacuum distilled rice shochu isn't really doing anything for you,
Hmm.
then this is a step up. This is a move in the character direction anyway. And
Gotcha.
so this one had been hanging around for a while. This was bottled in 2017, and I finally kicked it. So I'm happy to get through that. And I think
I was still
since we
living in
have
New York at that time, Christopher.
yeah, this is older than your Japanese tenure. It is light and kind of a summery thing, I suppose. I didn't try it with sparkling water. I bet it would be nice. But yeah, Hanashima Uta. How about newly opened?
Newly open. Let me see. Where am I? I don't know if it's within reach. Is it? Is it? Is it? Yep. I don't want to fall over backwards in my chair. That would be embarrassing.
See, I want to see your feet. I'll start. Ryugu is my newly opened. Oh, Hitori Aruki. That's a
Yep.
power play right there.
Yeah.
Ryugu is made by Tomita Distillery on the main island of Amami. Kokuto Sugar Shochu, 30% ABV, which is the standard down there, and really nice, super dark, rich, dark sugar notes as you
Sure.
would expect. It's definitely on the richer, more unctuous side of the spectrum. So
No doubt.
Steven and I are big fans, and not easy to find up here, but fortunately they've sold into, rather unexpectedly, they sold into Seijo Ishii, which is a chain of sort of upper crust supermarkets
Hmm.
in,
Hmm.
it may be outside of Tokyo. I have never visited one outside of Tokyo. It might be all of Kanto. I have no idea. But
Yeah, I
in
know
this,
we don't have it down here. I know that.
okay, it's you guys have another highfalutin chain, but it tends to be a little pricier. They have a lot
Hmm.
of I always thought they had a ton of imported stuff. It's really not all that much more of a selection than anywhere else. It's just priced a little higher, so it feels more special somehow. But Ryugu is top notch stuff, and I'm a
Nice.
fan.
Very cool. Yeah, mine as you mentioned is Hitori Aruki. This is an isho bean of sweet potato shochu. Again from Furusawa. I do love the stuff that she makes. She's the maker of, where is it? Over there. Yeah. She's the maker of Masako as well. This is a sweet potato shochu. Her dad actually developed this recipe, and it became one of her company's breakout
It
hits. But they don't
it
make a lot of
good.
it. It's very, very good. I had just kicked an isho bean of the Hitori Aruki koshu, so the aged Toriyaruki. Now, everything that they make at Furusawa is, I believe, aged at least 3 years before it goes in the bottle, except for maybe her summer shochu. But
Yeah,
her Hitoriyaruki Koshu, I believe, is between 5 and 8 years old. So really nice age on that one. But this is the unaged, well, the non-Koshu version, and I picked this up at the Shochu Fest in Fukuoka. So I bought this from her at her table,
nice.
and just cracked it. Really, really lovely sweet potato shochu. It's right in my wheelhouse for the kind of sweet potato shochu I enjoy. So I do tend to buy it when I can find it. Again, not easy to find. She's a small distiller, so
Very,
yeah,
very, very not easy to find. That's true. I covet that brand.
cool. Yeah, we're almost at 30 minutes, Christopher. We're running a little
Okay, yeah,
long
we're with two
compared to
weeks in
what
a
we're.
row. This is pretty good. I'm gonna
Yep.
throw up our last banner,
Yep.
um, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm not sure if we're gonna do another one of these next week. We're both gonna be in parts unknown and undecided. So we'll see. If we're both in a place where we know that we can get reliable, we can have the camera set up somewhere that's not shaking and decent
Mhm.
sound that's not interrupted by the sounds of fire trucks and that sort of thing, then we might give it a go. But
Sure.
also, please understand that episode number 154 could be a few weeks away.
Yeah.
So,
Fair.
if in the meantime, if you are an avid consumer of Show Tuesday, please do go and catch up on Japan Distilled podcast. Make sure that you've got all those episodes in your earpiece, and we'll be back. We'll be back, and we'll have new weird things to regale you with. But
Yeah.
until then, from both of us here in Japan to everybody out there all around the world, a very hearty and heartfelt kanpai.
Kanpai.